What's happening, everybody? It was a busy weekend across the SEC with tons of football spring scrimmages going on. We'll hit you with some of the biggest headlines from the last few days around the spring football world in the Southeastern Conference. Locked on SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's happening, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along. Today's episode, we're going to get into football gear a little bit more. Obviously, congrats to Alabama basketball advancing to the Final Four. Congrats to Tennessee on a great season, making it to the Elite Eight, but falling short against Purdue. So won't spend much time on basketball today. Did want to acknowledge those two things. Nate Oates and Alabama into the Final Four for the first time ever. Congratulations to them. But today, we're talking some SEC football. And I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. And this episode brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. All right, let's dive into it as we have some takeaways from the last couple days over at spring practices, all underway across the SEC. Of course, Mizzou, the lone wolf who already had their spring game, they got all their stuff out of the way very early. But some headlines over at Alabama. Obviously, Jalen Milroe and that offense looking to obviously learn the new playbook and all the new plays of the Kalen DeBoer offense coming in and taking things over. But a little bit of a scare. A couple days ago, Alabama sophomore wide receiver Jalen Hale suffering a significant knee injury during the Tide's practice. Kalen DeBoer said Hale will be out for the spring. He told reporters that a timeline for a return is unclear, but he was one of the returning pieces to the wide receiver group, which loses Jermaine Burton to the NFL draft. They lose Isaiah Bond, Amari Niblack, and Malik Benson to the transfer portal. But Hale ranked third with 148 yards among the returning pass catchers from last season, along with Kobe Prentice and CJ Dupree. Kalen DeBoer saying we'll be down for the spring, but there's some evaluation that will still need to take place to kind of figure out what his timeline will be as far as the rest of the year. Now, Tide Illustrated reported Hale left practice in an ambulance, but it appears Hale is on the road to recovery. He took to social media saying, "I'm doing good, everybody. I'm out of the hospital. I'm moving around a little bit, just waiting on the next process to get to my rehab. It wasn't as bad as it could have been, so I'm blessed and thankful I will return stronger than ever." So, again, DeBoer providing additional information about his injury timeline, but saying there will still be evaluation to figure out if he will miss the entire year. Alabama wide receivers coach Jamarcus Shepard praised the likes of Kobe Prentice for understanding the new playbook better than anybody. Kendrick Law, who developed into kind of a piece where they moved all around in the Tommy Rees offense as a freshman. He could be another weapon. And then, of course, they bring in the Washington transfer, Jeremy Bernard. He's been banged up a little bit, but all eyes are on five-star prospect Ryan Williams, who will enroll this summer after graduating from Saraland. And obviously he's one everybody's looking at, keeping an eye on, and want to see him connect with Jalen Milroe and develop some chemistry and get going, because Williams could really take the SEC by storm this year, kind of like we expect Cam Coleman to do at Auburn. But we'll keep an eye on a couple other guys, third-year player Emmanuel Henderson and freshman Jaron Hamilton, also some guys to keep an eye on. But Alabama's A-Day game coming up on April 13th, and got to see how these wide receivers and running backs, by the way, Jam Miller, expected to play a bigger role this year in the backfield. So a lot of pieces to watch for Alabama, but of course the headline there with Jalen Hale suffering a pretty significant injury. All right, other notes from spring ball. Arkansas welcomed fans and media into Donald W. Reynolds Razorback Stadium Saturday morning for their first open scrimmage of the spring. The Razorbacks ran 152 plays and ran all kinds of different situations, including red zone work, 2-minute drill. It was the first chance for fans to see the three quarterbacks competing in the Bobby Petrino offense, and projected starting quarterback Taylen Green led the first team offense on touchdown drives against the defensive starters on each of the first two series. He completed a 24-yard touchdown pass through double coverage to Luke Haas, and had a big 15-yard run on the second drive. But he did complete less than 50% of his passes, according to reports. Did throw an interception to Hudson Clark, had a few other balls dropped that could have been picks. So he's got to work on his consistency. And by the way, we had Taylen Green on the show a couple weeks ago. If you missed it, encourage you to check that out on YouTube or the podcast. Just search Locked On SEC and Taylen Green. Great young kid, and rooting for him, obviously. Now, wide receivers for Arkansas, Andrew Armstrong and Jaden Wilson both sat out Saturday scrimmage. So Isaiah Sategna stepped up and had the best day of all the receivers, 5 catches for 83 yards and a score. Running back-wise, Rashad Dubinion, he got the start alongside Green in the backfield, got the most carries, and Jaquindon Jackson split time with the first team as well. So a good bevy of backs there in the backfield for Arkansas. Defensively, Landon Jackson had a strip sack that resulted in a Quincy Rhodes fumble recovery that ruined a promising drive by the second-team offense. So Landon Jackson, we know he is going to wreck shop this year on that defensive line for Arkansas. But Bobby Petrino doing a radio interview on Friday and talking about Taylen Green at quarterback and said, look, Taylen's done a nice job really since the day he got here. He's a natural leader. Sometimes when guys first get here or when you first take a job like this, you put the balls out there and see who goes and picks up the ball and jumps to the front of the line. That was certainly what Taylen Green did. So obviously part of our interview with Taylen, he talked about the big selling point for him was coming and getting into the Bobby Petrino offense. And obviously, he is jumping right into it. All right, over at Florida. Florida true freshman quarterback DJ Lagway had his first spring scrimmage and nice little measuring stick for the 18-year-old. He's the nation's #1 quarterback recruit. And while we're still trying to figure out what his role is going to be, obviously, he will be the backup quarterback to Graham Mertz, who is the savvy veteran quarterback. But Lagway, according to reports, played primarily with the second-team offense Saturday in the Swamp, showcasing his athletic ability. Billy Napier saying afterward, Lagway did a good job today, made some plays with his feet, played with the twos most of the day. And the good news is Lagway isn't expected to push to be the starter this year. Now, the question is, are they going to have some packages for him? You know, keep in mind, we kind of saw that with Anthony Richardson at Florida. They got him in there in certain packages and certain looks because he was just so talented. You were like, well, we got to get him on the field. But Graham Mertz is the 23-year-old veteran leader of the offense, and Billy Napier expects him to be the leader on that side of the ball. But not to say you can't get Lagway in some pieces. Billy Napier did say the offense committed 2 turnovers in the red zone on Saturday, so they have a lot to clean up these next 2 weeks. One other guy who stood out, Florida wide receiver Aiden Mizell, had a nice day in pass-catching drills, hauling in throws from Graham Mertz and Lagway. And Mizell is a 4-star recruit from the Orlando area, hoping to take on a bigger role in the offense after redshirting last season. But obviously a lot of excitement for DJ Lagway, and a lot of Florida Gator fans want to see him out there. I mean, he looks the part for being such a young guy. One more in Florida defensively. Billy Napier singling out South Carolina transfer linebacker Grayson Pup Howard as a standout on that side of the ball already. He said Howard's taking advantage of the increased reps in practice with linebackers Shamar James and Derek Wingo coming off injuries and unable to take full part in the full contact. But the Florida Gators 2 weeks away from the orange and blue game coming up on April 13th. All right, we still got more to go as we recap some of the action from the last couple days across the SEC in spring practices. We'll get to that here in just a second. Thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Versus episode presented to you by our friends over at the Gametime app. Look, Gametime is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and even easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. So with killer last-minute deals, the all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Gametime is going to take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. We talked about their last-minute deals. You could save up to 60% off last minute for sports and all kinds of other events. Their flash deals offer you to save even more with exclusive in-app deals. The zone deals, you save even more when you choose a section and let Gametime choose the seats for you. The all-in pricing, you toggle that feature and it literally puts your whole total up front. No surprise fees at checkout. That's what you're going to pay. And of course, the seat views is the best part. You get a panoramic view from your seat in the app, so you know exactly what the view from your seats is going to look like. And your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app today. Create an account. Use our code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account. Redeem our code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Right along here, Locked On SEC. Hey, if you guys are watching Fox Sports or ESPN all on TV all day long, and you have to turn down the volume with all the yelling, make the switch over to Locked On Sports Today. It's a free 24/7 streaming channel, program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today, bringing you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. All right, let's dive back into it as we dissect some of the takeaways the last few days across spring practices. And we head over to Athens, Georgia. As Kirby Smart looking for more leaders on his team. And obviously he's got a big one back in quarterback Carson Beck. But you lose tight end Brock Bowers, and it appears another tight end is stepping up. Oscar Delp is stepping up and should bring some quality leadership on the offense as a dual threat tight end that is going to keep Georgia running versatile two tight end sets. Kirby Smart saying last week, Oscar really physical, does things his way. He's not Brock. He doesn't try to be Brock, but he's a quiet leader, similar to Brock in that way, and really physical. He's tough. He knows the work ethic it requires. He said the guy has taken a lot of reps since being here. He's been durable. He's doing a good job leading in that room, as well as Lawson Lucky. So Oscar Delp would be the next big star of that Georgia offense if it all comes together. Now, one other note on Georgia, Duke place kicker Charlie Ham announced on Instagram over the weekend he intends to be a Georgia Bulldog. He will have 1 year of eligibility remaining. He was previously coached at Duke by Georgia assistant Kirk Benedict when Benedict was Duke's special teams coordinator and recruiting coordinator a couple seasons ago. Now, Benedict has been at Athens the last 2 seasons, but is now Georgia's special teams coordinator, so it makes sense. A connection to Charlie Ham. He was a semifinalist for the Lou Groza Award back in 2020, and he will likely take over kickoff duties after former kicker Jared Zirkle transferred to Texas A&M. Now, Ham is going to be a walk-on at Georgia, but you expect probably just the kickoff duties. Starting kicker Peyton Woodring is back, obviously, and expected to handle all the field goal kicking, but good to have competition in that room. But kind of cool, a guy who was a Lou Groza semifinalist a couple of years ago. Charlie Ham coming over to the Georgia Bulldogs. Got to make those field goals. All right, over at LSU, they continue their practices a few weeks from their spring game. And a quarterback, a lot of eyes there as Jaden Daniels is off to the NFL. But Garrett Nussmeier looking good and composed during their up-tempo work. Obviously, he's trying to ease in under a new scheme in Joe Sloan as the new offensive coordinator. But reports say Nussmeier very vocal, talking to the guys a lot, and helping coach up early enrollee Colin Hurley coming in to compete in that quarterback room. Now, the backup quarterback battle has been a good one. Obviously, they bring in A.J. Swan, the former starter at Vanderbilt, and Ricky Collins, their former highly touted recruit. So both those guys battling and, according to reports, switching QB2 roles every day, A.J. Swan and Ricky Collins. In the backfield, veteran back Josh Williams is back. He was taking first-team reps along with Caleb Jackson splitting reps, and those two guys will handle a lot of the duties early on throughout spring. At wide receiver, we know Kyron Lacey is back, Chris Hilton. Both those guys expected to take a big step forward, filling in the role of Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr., but who's going to be the number 3? They still have Aaron Anderson from the transfer from Alabama who's been there. But according to reports, clear that Kyron Lacey and Chris Hilton have separated themselves. Kyle Parker remains a guy to keep an eye on, compete for that number 3 spot, along with CJ Daniels and Xavier Thomas. Both those guys coming in through the transfer portal this offseason. Defensively for LSU, Ashton Stamps and Javen Toviano remain the first-team corners. And then Jordan Gilbert and Major Burns have been the safeties on the first team. Burns has been working in that star role in Blake Baker's new defense. And one more note on LSU. Just a couple days ago, former Wisconsin defensive end Gio Paez announced he is going to transfer to LSU. Spent the past 5 seasons with the Badgers. Will have 1 season of eligibility remaining. Played in 13 games with 6 starts at Wisconsin this past year. And next up, we head over to Knoxville, Tennessee, as they went into Neyland Stadium for their first scrimmage of spring practice a few days ago. Josh Heupel mentioning offensively there was a great play from wide receiver Mike Matthews. Said the freshman wide receiver competed hard throughout the day, made a big play down the sideline, also brought up the young defensive backs during his scrimmage. He said defensively, Boo Carter, one of the DBs who impressed during the scrimmage. He also said John Slaughter did a great job defending in the secondary, defending a deep ball down the sideline. And Slaughter is a sophomore now in line to take on a bigger role. He also said freshman DB Caleb Beasley also drawing some praise. So maybe a name to keep an eye on there. In the backfield, Tennessee sophomore running back Cam Seldon is going to be sidelined for the remainder of spring practice after undergoing surgery on his shoulder. That was last week. Josh Heupel confirmed that. So that makes 2 running backs unable to go throughout spring practice. Cam Seldon sideline and incoming freshman Peyton Lewis. So that opens the door for sophomores Khalifa Keith and Deshaun Bishop to make the most out of their opportunities. So see if one of those guys steps up and really shows some things in the run game. Now, redshirt freshman quarterback Nico Iamaleava operated well during the scrimmage, said Josh Heupel. It was the former 5-star recruit's first scrimmage as the presumed starting quarterback. Heupel said he's been really good practices and leading up to the practices, said being intentional in conversations, making sure to get on the same page with all his guys. But he said also the offensive line is growing and bringing energy to that group before a drive and during the course of it. He said, I thought today just the way that Nico functioned and operated, he controlled the huddle, went into a 4-minute situation at the end, understood the play clock, game clock, all of it, just functioning and operating extremely maturely. So that's what you want to hear if you're a Vols fan, and all eyes on Nico. We talked about it a few weeks ago. Dark horse for the Heisman, heck, in the Heisman conversation. So keep an eye on that and what he does there at Tennessee. All right, still more to come here on Locked On SEC, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. We'll hit on Kentucky, South Carolina, and a few more when we return right here on Locked On SEC. But first, I want to remind you, this episode presented by our friends over at Fire TV. Fire TV is your destination for sports, from live games to highlights to in-depth analysis. Fire TV has got amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick. You can plug into any existing TV that provides access to millions of movies, TV episodes, as well as free and live TV, whether it's opening weekend for baseball, the tournament, whatever it is, you want to make sure you have a Fire TV. And of course, they recently created Fire TV channels to create a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. And that includes all of us at Locked On and most of the big pro sports leagues and college conferences. Fire TV channels let you dive into all the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to date on all the latest in the world of sports, from the NBA, MLB, and lots more. They got it all, including great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, cooking videos. All of it is up there. Go check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV, go check out Amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. That is where you can learn more. Trust us on this. Amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. Go learn more about them today. All right, roll on here, Locked On SEC, and I have a couple more schools you want to hit on. We're not hitting on everybody because there are some schools that had a little bit of a break with spring break and all that kind of stuff. So Not really touching on Auburn today or Mississippi State or Vanderbilt or Texas A&M, but we'll get to those guys here before the week is up. But figured we were just hit on some of the big storylines from some of the teams that hit scrimmages either over the weekend or at least the last couple days. And so let's dive back into it as we continue on going on around the conference. And the next stop, we stop up over in Lexington, Kentucky, as the Wildcats, a little less than halfway through their spring drills after Saturday's practice. And to this point, head coach Mark Stoops says he is pleased with what his team has done. He said, I like where we're at. I like the way the team has practiced. We got 2 weeks, and they've been putting in a lot of work. I appreciate their attitude, their willingness to take to coaching. And he said, I just told the team as we walked off the practice field, if you look at last year's either success or areas where we fell short, he said 90% of the time it comes down to fundamentals. And fundamentally, are you doing the things necessary and executing? Stoops and his staff trying to find that spot between working on the fundamentals and installing the new scheme from new offense coordinator Bush Hamdan. And Stoops saying, look, I think there's a fine line in the spring. We have a new OC again, and you have to put so much into that. So I'm very pleased with the way that we've been able to put all that in. A lot of window dressing and a lot of things that make it hard on defenses. The critical part for us will be these next couple weeks and try to define that. So being able to function without coaches out there, trying to coach them before and after play, that's what we're looking to do here these last 2 weeks. Now, as far as personnel goes, in the backfield, they are going to lose the big-time running back Ray Davis. He is off to the NFL, but true freshman running back Jason Patterson has caught the eye of his new OC, Bush Hamdan. Hamdan saying a couple days ago after practice, really have been pleased with Jason. Number 26, he has done a really nice job as a young guy. We've put him in there with the 2s initially, but he moved up with the 1s and is really coming along. Patterson signed with Kentucky. He's a 3-star prospect out of the state of Florida. He's among 3 new members to Kentucky's running back room, joining fellow Florida freshman signee Tavani Mizell and Ohio State transfer Chip Trayanum. So maybe a name to keep an eye on there. Jason Patterson in the backfield for the Kentucky Wildcats. And in the wide receiver room, true freshman Hardley Gilmore and UAB transfer Fred Ferrier are turning heads. Gilmore signed with Kentucky in December out of the state of Florida. Joined the team for their Gator Bowl practice in Jacksonville. He's just 17 years old after reclassifying to the class of 2024. Bush Hamdan saying, I think Hardley is probably one of the more talented 17-year-olds I've been around at the wide receiver spot. We just got to get things to slow down for him. But obviously Kentucky still with a really good wide receiver room and some big-time weapons for their new quarterback, Brock Vandergriff, coming over from Georgia. But Dane Key is back. Barian Brown is back. And some other guys to keep an eye on, like Raymond Cottrell coming over from A&M, Jamari Macklin, Shamar Porter. So a lot of pieces to keep an eye on. They do lose Tavian Robinson, but Dane Key and Barian Brown have been 2 very productive pieces, and they are back. So Brock Vandergriff got some weapons to throw the ball to there in Lexington. Next up, stop over at Ole Miss. And a beautiful Saturday morning over there in Oxford. Ole Miss took to the practice field for another spring practice. Media was allowed in to watch several periods. According to some of the reports, Ole Miss looking very good, obviously, on offense, as they have for basically the whole Lane Kiffin era. But one of the big things that several people have pointed out, they're very deep on the offensive line. They bring in Washington transfer Julius Buelow, who usually plays guard. Well, they had him playing tackle on Saturday with Jaden Williams. They said Reese McIntyre took some snaps at center. Jeremy James was playing some guard after playing tackle earlier in the week. Nate Caleppo continued to stay at guard, where he played for Washington this past season. Remember, they bring in the 2 guys from Washington through the portal. So, going to be interesting to watch that O-line for Ole Miss. Times the last couple of years, they've had some issues, but looks like a deep group there and a lot of versatility there. One note we saw said there was a really good one-on-one matchup on offense versus defense. They said sophomore wide receiver Caden Lee versus sophomore cornerback A.J. Brown. They said the duo lined up face-to-face at the 10-yard line with Jackson Dart QBing. In their first matchup, Lee was unable to get open, putting Brown ahead in the matchup. And then on the next play, Caden Lee cut across the middle for an open slant and got the best of A.J. Brown. So just kind of some of the takeaways happening there over at Ole Miss practice, and they got weapons everywhere. Defensively, look, every day you read something new about Walter Nolan and Josh Harris looking dominant on that interior of the defensive line. They do a good job closing those gaps on run plays and disrupting. And then on the edge, you got Jared Ivey back with some Tarian Perkins on the other side, and just some studs there that are expecting to make a lot of noise in the SEC this year. So a couple notes there from Ole Miss. And lastly, we stop over at South Carolina as they were in full pads a couple of days ago, stepping it up to at this stage of spring ball. And one thing of note, there has been a lot of shakeup on their offensive line as they continue to experiment and try guys out of different spots and try to find that right combination. A week ago, or one of their early spring practices, they had Ja'Kai Moore at left tackle, Marquis Anderson at left guard, Vershawn Lee at center, Trevon Ball at right guard, and Kaysen Lee at right tackle. But a few days ago, they had FAU transfer Kamar Bell taking first team snaps at right tackle ahead of Kaysen Henry. So they're just going to continue to mix in guys and try to find that right combination. But one thing I saw the State reported on Thursday was that five-star freshman Josiah Thompson was not in attendance. They said a spokesperson was not aware of his absence. So keep an eye on that. Another big note for Gamecocks spring practice. Sophomore stud wide receiver Nick Harbor not participating in spring ball. Not a bad thing. He is instead running track for South Carolina. Last week during an outdoor event, he clocked a collegiate personal best time at 10.16 seconds in the 100 meters. He was at practice a few days ago there at South Carolina, but in street clothes, just kind of observing and walking around talking with guys. But just one of those things that big-time five-star signee for South Carolina a year ago, and couldn't really get him involved like they really wanted to as a freshman, but he's got that speed, man. Just get him on the field and see what he does this year in 2024. But one other thing, as the State reported, they did get to see one team period on Thursday, a third down drill between the full offense and defense. They said at quarterback, it was Lenora Sellers, of course, in on the first play. But they said Luke Doty was in on the second and Davis Bevel in on the third. Robbie Ashford did not get a rep in that drill. Now, in the opening spring practice, Luke Doty did not rep at quarterback at all. He was working at wide receiver and a kick returner. So don't know what that says. Might have just been a day to maybe get him a look again at quarterback. But a lot of people expected Robbie Ashford would be the backup to Lenora Sellers. And who knows? Maybe they even try to use him on some goal line plays like Auburn did the last couple of years there. So anyway, those were some takeaways from some of the spring practices. Again, some teams having scrimmages over the weekend, others a couple of days ago. Just thought we would catch you up on some of the headlines going on around spring practices across the SEC. Thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to everydayers. Come on back tomorrow on the show. We are going to have a special guest with us, a current SEC football player going to join us, so make sure you tune in for that. And hey, for your second listen, check out Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. It's called Locked On Sports Today. All the biggest stories in the sports world that you need to know. Check it out. Locked On Sports Today is the show. I'm Chris Gordy. This has been Locked On SEC. You guys have an awesome day. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Come on back.